The very first people outside of Twitch to see the doc's whispers to the minor did something that tells us a lot about the messages. And what they did sheds light on some of what the ex-Twitch employees are saying, both directly and through implication about the doc. I'm a trial lawyer and I've been dissecting all the evidence around the DrDisRespect ban from Twitch to teach you guys how to evaluate the evidence like a lawyer and decide for yourselves what to believe. This video is going to dive into how circumstantial evidence might actually discredit some of the direct evidence that we discussed in the previous video, including the doc's own admission. It's worth watching that video real quick before you see this one, but you could watch it after. I mean, they go hand in hand, okay? So just understand the direct evidence and the circumstantial evidence have to be taken in together. So back in 2020, apparently Twitch reported the doc's messages and turned them over to the NCMEC. This was done so the NCMEC could investigate the situation and report it to police. Now, who the hell is that? The NCMEC is the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They're funded by the DOJ, the federal government, okay? In case you don't know how these grant funds work, you have to show stats to the government to make sure Uncle Sam knows where his money is being spent, okay? The NCMEC likely needs to show the DOJ stats of their work in order to keep getting that dough. These stats probably include things like number of reports they took in, number of reports that turned into investigations, number of investigations that led to arrests, and number of investigations and arrests that led to convictions. See, they have a very strong incentive to fully investigate this kind of allegation. And since Twitch turned over the whisper logs and everything Twitch had, for sure the NCMEC went full send into this thing. And despite all that, there was no arrest or criminal filing. That doesn't quite add up to what the ex-Twitch employees implied the doc did. Legend, this is all circumstantial evidence. Yeah, circumstantial evidence is actually very, very strong. Let me explain. My friend was driving his yellow Porsche 911 GT3, and if you know what that is, it's a sweet, sweet car, okay? He was stopped at a red light when a girl was driving her white car behind him, texting. Well, she didn't exactly make it to a complete stop until she reached the rear seats of his vehicle. He gets out of the car. First thing he says is, "Do you know what you've done?" She tells the cops that she saw a black SUV rear-end her car and push her into the 911. She then said she saw the SUV make a U-turn and flee the scene, hit and run. What do you think the cop did when he realized that her car is white and the car that she says that hit her was black? Well, he went around to the back of her car and checked for any black paint transfer, any crash damage, any evidence that what she said is true. And guess what he found? Nothing. That's a perfect example of when direct evidence, what she says she saw, is disproven by circumstantial evidence, the lack of the crash damage to her rear bumper. And the law understands this. In court, this is what a real judge instructs the jury when it comes to direct evidence versus circumstantial evidence. Facts may be proved by direct or circumstantial evidence, or by a combination of both. Direct evidence can prove a fact itself. Circumstantial evidence also may be called indirect evidence. Both direct and circumstantial evidence are acceptable types of evidence to prove or disprove the elements of a charge, including intent and mental state and acts necessary to conviction. And neither is necessarily more reliable than the other. Neither is entitled to any greater weight than the other. That's what the judges say. So what we've got is direct evidence from Bloomberg's 3 sources and from Rolling Stone's 1 source that the doc was sending sexually explicit messages to a minor. We've also got the direct evidence of the doc saying he was sending messages, not sexually explicit, but messages to a minor. But then on the other end, we have the NCMEC investigating this with the whispers in hand and everything these ex-Twitch employees saw, and maybe even more. And their work, the NCMEC's work, has led to the conclusion that there was no criminal activity. But sending sexually explicit messages to a minor is criminal activity. Actually, there are 3 different crimes that these allegations can prove. Number 1, contacting a minor with intent to commit certain felonies. They have to prove that the doc contacted the minor with the intent to do something sexual according to the law. Number 2, arranging to meet with the minor for lewd purpose. Remember, they're implying that he was trying to meet her at TwitchCon, but really what they said was, he asked what her plans were at TwitchCon. Okay. Number 3, distributing, sending, or exhibiting harmful material to a minor. That actually includes messages, not only pictures and video. If he's saying sexting stuff, then he is guilty of this crime. So how did the investigation started by the NCMEC not find enough evidence of any of these 3 charges if what the Twitch employees said is 100% accurate? You're telling me they didn't embellish any of it? Like no spin whatsoever. So then that means the NCMEC was in on some sort of cover-up. Or did they refer it to the cops and then the cops covered it up? Or did the cops refer it to the DA and the DA covered it up? Something's not adding up here. On the one hand, you have the ex-Twitch employees who seem to have a bit of a motive themselves, giving us basic and non-detailed information, like they aren't even saying the age of the minor, versus the NCMEC, or even the cops, or even the DA, who doesn't give a damn about the doc, or streaming, or none of that. They don't know any of this world, okay? And they're kind of against each other. So when you talk about different motives, it sheds a new light on all these allegations. Here's a question people keep asking. Why did it take so long for Twitch to hear about this if it happened in 2017 and they only heard in 2020? Well, Bloomberg sources say that a complaint was later filed through Twitch's reporting system and we don't know when. But ultimately, it doesn't really change the fact that Doc did message a minor, and it doesn't really change the severity of what those messages were. We don't know. So let's take a look at what we do know and the evidence we have in front of us in the record, so to speak. First, we know Doc messaged a minor in 2017. He admitted to it. He knew it was a minor if you believe the Rolling Stone source, and the messages leaned inappropriate on one end of the spectrum and were sexually explicit on the other end. How far in either way is for you to decide. Secondly, we know Doc's messages were turned over to the NCMEC for further investigation and or reporting to police. Third, we know Doc was never charged with the 3 crimes he potentially committed if you believe the most extreme side of the spectrum, which is that he was sexually texting a minor. Also, Doc was paid his full contract by Twitch after the ban, and there were no new allegations since 2017. We can assume that, otherwise things would have been blowing up way worse than this. Now here are the things we have no evidence of either way. We have no evidence of exactly what was said, and I doubt the chat logs would be released. If they were bad enough to bury the doc, these ex-Twitch employees would have probably leaked it, or at least Bloomberg and Rolling Stone would have seen it and said something. And if they weren't that bad, then maybe the doc would consider leaking them. But I don't think that helps him in any way ever, because it was already immoral and he already admitted that it was bad and wrong. We also don't know how far the investigation went after it went to the NCMEC. It could have gone to the cops, and it could have gone all the way to the DA. But if the DA didn't file it, we would have no information about how far it had gone. All we know is it did not lead to a filing because that's public record. And we don't know the reason why it didn't lead to any of that. Finally, we don't know the age of the minor. So many people on Reddit and Twitter are saying the minor was 17, but that only came from an email leak that was sent to Stan, and he and I discussed it. We have no way to corroborate or evaluate whether or not that's true. Some of it was directly proven in some things that were said later, and some of it was directly disproven by other things. So it could have all just been a great guess. But that doesn't change the fact that the doc admitted it was a minor, which is below the age of 18, and that it was investigated and turned up to be no crime. But Slasher seems to know the age of the minor. Destiny asked him straight up, and Slasher dodged the question because Slasher won't tell us. And that's why I'm so critical of the first reports on this matter. Slasher seems to be teasing us with this info like it's content, and his whole reporting on this matter reeks. If you want to see my first thoughts on how he reported, click this video right here.